brief summary of last time. Of course, if you're listening, you probably don't need a summary, but just brief summary. So last time we were reading, we ended where Samuel had gone with his friend to his house. The last thing he remembers is going with his friend to his house. And then he wakes up on the beach with no recollection of what happened between his home and there, with the exception of that moment where they ran into Lobo, the man that his father had been in some kind of argument with in their home earlier that same evening. So now he wakes up, he doesn't have a memory of that time period, and he kind of expresses that he's had issues with sleepwalking for a long time, and it's something he finds embarrassing, so he doesn't really tell anyone about. And now we're picking up from there and finding out. Well, we won't find out what happened just yet, but we'll get into some other stuff. So this was on page 18 that we left off, so this is where we're picking up now. He was lifting the covers to go back to bed when his mother opened the door. "Oh, good, you're awake," Kate smiled. "We're going into town," she informed him. "I promised your siblings that I would take them shopping before we go home. Plus, your father has some business to take over there." "All right, I'll see you when you get back," he told her. "No," Kate laughed. "You're coming along to help me." "But I was going back to bed," he groaned. "You can take a nap when we get back if we have time. Hurry up and get ready. Oh, and if your grandmother asks, I gave you a big long lecture about not leaving after dark, all right?" He nodded his head, grateful that he did not have to endure an actual lecture from his parents or grandmother. "Good. Now hurry, I don't want to be long," she instructed before closing the door behind herself. He was just buttoning up his last button when Bea barged in excitedly. "Guess what?" She bounced up and down on her tiptoes, the kitten clutched tightly to her chest. "What?" He smiled tiredly. He reached for his watch, with the emerald snake forming a circle around the edges and the picture of the world inside. It was one of the few watches that had been gifted to him. The rest he had picked or designed himself. He put it on, then turned his attention back to Bea. "Papa said I can keep my kitten," she announced proudly. He sat down to put on his shoes as Baven opened the door further. "Come on, we're just waiting for you," she informed him. "How many watches do you have?" asked Bea curiously. Samuel smiled. "About 40. Bea looked shocked, then shook her head and left with the kitten in her arms. Samuel smiled as she went, knowing he had a watch obsession he was not ashamed to own up to. He only nibbled at his breakfast, too tired to eat. It wasn't until everyone else had finished that he noticed his father watching him. Worried his father would ask what was wrong and force him to admit he had been sleepwalking, he got up from the table as quickly as he could. David grabbed his shoulder from behind and turned him to face him. "Samuel," he began kindly, "don't let what Grandma said last night change who you are. Your mother and I love you no matter what." "What?" Samuel asked, momentarily confused. "Oh, right. I'm fine, Papa. I've lived with her for a long time. I'm used to her," Samuel assured him. David looked unconvinced. "Papa, I have known her my whole life and lived with her for over 2 years. And if you expect me to stay, we are just going to have to expect that she is going to talk like that," Samuel insisted. "You're kind of smart for your age," smiled David. Samuel returned the smile appreciatively. "I'm only tired. I promise. Nothing else is wrong." With his arm around him, David smiled. "We had better hurry before your mother gets upset." Samuel smiled to himself, knowing it would take a lot more than waiting to get Kate upset. "Hurry," Baven called out to Samuel. His parents and grandmother rode in one carriage, while Emery, Baven, and Bea waited for him in another. "I haven't been shopping here in a long time," exclaimed Baven as they left. "Do you think that doll shop Mama took me to when I was Bea's age is still there?" "As boring as that sounds," began Emery, "Samuel and I are going into the blacksmith to look at swords." Samuel smiled, tired but amused. "I'm going with you," said Bea, excited by the idea. "See, even Bea knows what fun is," stated Emery. Why would you want to go there anyway? You never actually played with them. You always took mine and Samuel's toys, complained Emery. Bevan giggled. Your toys were always more exciting, but that doesn't mean it wasn't a good memory. Samuel laid his head back, tired of having to fight to keep his eyes open. Are you all right? Asked Bevan. You don't look well. I had a rough night, he explained truthfully. He was still too embarrassed to admit he had been sleepwalking. The ride felt rough and short, but the brisk ocean breeze in the bustling port invigorated him. Breathing in deeply, he let the scent bring back memories of the times his grandfather had spent with him here. People had always said that his grandfather was a tough man to get to know, but it was always obvious to everyone that he had a special place in his heart for Samuel. As the carriage left them, he could see the ports where his grandfather had brought him when he was 5. He would show him the ships coming in and explain the different kinds. Samuel remembered walking around with him for hours, listening as he would talk about who the ships belonged to and from where they had come. The most interesting ship was always his grandfather's, as his cargo often consisted of exotic animals. He was too young to know what he did with them, but there was a growing fascination for these animals among the wealthy and royal families. They would buy them for show, or so he heard. Not too far down the street, he had bought him a model ship. Samuel took it with him everywhere, until Emery, only a toddler at the time, had gotten a hold of it and broken it. The streets were filled with many of the poor, begging for relief. He often heard his grandmother complain about the state of the streets and the people in them, but she offered no ideas of resolution. There were many more things he could reminisce about, but his parents and grandmother had now gotten out of their carriage and were approaching them. Kate handed everyone but Bea an allowance. What about me? She asked, when it was clear her mother had no intentions of giving her anything. You're coming with me, Kate informed her. Mama, protested Bea, I was going with Emery and Samuel to look at swords. Bea, you're coming with me, and arguing will not change that, stated Kate in a soft but firm voice. Pouting, Bea stomped her foot. Be grateful your parents are easy on you, scolded Ines. I would have spanked you for having a fit like that. Come on, Bea, Kate ordered, ignoring her mother-in-law's comment. Meet us back here by 2 p.m., instructed David. Samuel noticed how women were staring at David admiringly as they passed, just as the men stared at Kate. Yes, Papa, agreed Bevan. She reached up and kissed him, then her mother on the cheek. She curtsied politely at her grandmother before joining her brothers. She certainly has the two of you wrapped around her finger, they could hear Ines comment as they left. After having walked for several hours, Bevan spoke up. This will be the 4th shop that you have taken us to, that only you and Emery are interested in, she complained. That's because he was hoping to only take us to the interesting places, teased Emery. As they walked, Samuel couldn't help but notice the men, both young and old, stare after Bevan, just like they did their parents. It was as if she were a piece of artwork on display. However, she seemed not to notice, or chose to ignore them. He wasn't sure which. I just have this one last shop to stop by. Then you can pick the next one, promised Samuel. They stopped in front of the watchmaker's shop. A watch? Bevan asked incredulously. Don't you have enough? I'm not here for a watch. He opened the door and was greeted by a small, gray-haired man in his 50s. Samuel, how have you been? Asked the old man. Good. How about you, Eli? He smiled. Hey, is this Bevan and Emery? He looked surprised. I've not seen either of you in such a long time. I can't believe how much you have grown. They beamed as he noted how much older and taller they had become. However, Bevan was not able to bring even a vague recollection of him to her mind, not wanting him to know that she just smiled. How much longer will you be in town? He asked. Just a couple more weeks. Pa has business in Boston he has to get back to, explained Emery. Oh, well, it's good to see you. Tell your ma and pa I said hello. I came to see how Francisco was working out, stated Samuel. Where is he? I've been wondering the same thing, stated Eli. I told you I wouldn't be looking for an apprentice for at least 5 more years, but upon your insistence, I agreed to take him on. Next time you recommend someone, make sure they're going to show up." "I don't understand. He was excited about working here. He stopped by my house last night to tell me about it." Eli shrugged. "I'll check on him," offered Samuel. "Well, we had better go. We have to meet up with our parents soon." "It was good to see you." "Tell your parents to stop by before they leave town," Eli called after him. "I will," Samuel responded as they walked out the door. When they stepped out onto the street, Samuel couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. He worried about Francisco. "This doesn't make sense." "He had his heart set on this job," stated Samuel once they were back outside. "Perhaps he is sick," suggested Baven. "We'll stop by on the way home," Samuel concluded. He turned his attention to Baven. "Come on, let's get the boring part of this outing over with," he teased. She gave him a half smile as though annoyed and elbowed him playfully with his ribs. Elbowed him playfully in the ribs. Okay. I don't know. Maybe I'll stop here for now and then pick up later. So this is page 23. So we covered today pages 18 through 23. We'll leave there.